Lake Sevan rises at 1,900 meters and, uniquely, hosts a freshwater peninsula that once was an island, preserving medieval monasteries on its cliffs. From the Yerevan Cascade's mirrored stairways to Khor Virap's Mount Ararat viewpoint, Armenia stitches living history into volcanic ridges and alpine forests. Lake Sevan sits more than 1,900 meters above sea level, making it one of the largest high-altitude freshwater lakes in Eurasia. Do you know that Lake Sevan's waters once isolated the rocky promontory where Sevanavank Monastery stands, turning it into an island until the mid-20th century? Founded in 874, Sevanavanks twin churches, Surp Arakalots and Surp Astvatsatsan, rise from dark volcanic tuff. Their compact courtyards, narrow stairways, and weathered kachkars bear silent witness to centuries of devotion. Inside, faded frescoes and carved crosses suggest a rhythm of monks' prayers and royal patronage. From its terraces, the lake unfurls like a polished mirror, framing reed beds, distant islets, and the Armenian highlands. The monastery alternated between sanctuary and fortress, its bells signaling both worship and watchfulness. Down at the shore, fishermen mend nets and villagers haul trout, continuing livelihoods tied to Sevan's waters. Local lore and archaeological traces connect Sevanavank to Noravank and Hiravank, stitching island, shore, and cemetery into one cultural map. Seasons repaint the scene: autumn's fiery slopes, winter's silver ice, each turning the monastery's silhouette anew. Walk from the courtyard toward the ridgeline road, and the landscape slowly folds into pine-scented valleys that lead to Dilijan. This journey, water to wood, reveals how Armenia's sacred sites are woven into a continuous natural tapestry. Sevanavank asks you to listen to wind and wave and to the stories carved in stone over 1,000 years. Standing there, you see how one lakeside promontory can hold faith, memory, and the pulse of daily life at once. Beneath the sunlit cliffs of Garni, Armenia hides basalt formations so geometrically perfect they're unmatched anywhere on Earth. Do you know the Azat River Gorge by Garni contains the Symphony of the Stones, a wall of hexagonal basalt columns, formed when lava cooled into an orchestra of stone? Here, the 1st century Garni Temple rises like an unexpected Greco-Roman echo in the Armenian highlands, its Ionic columns unique across the Caucasus. Rebuilt painstakingly after a devastating 1679 earthquake, the temple is the only standing pagan temple of its style in the former Soviet territories, a rare survivor of shifting emperors. Local lore says Armenian kings held sunrise rituals here, turning the temple's steps toward the rising sun that silhouettes Mount Ararat on clear mornings. Beneath the temple, an ancient spring feeds the gorge, and once supplied baths in the adjacent Garni Royal Complex, linking human architecture to volcanic geology. Wandering from the temple's colonnade, you can trace a trail where basalt pillars lean like organ pipes, and every step carries you deeper into a landscape forged by fire. That same landscape funnels visitors naturally toward the nearby medieval monastery of Geghard, its rock-carved chapels seeming to grow out of the canyon walls. At Geghard, the contrast is overwhelming. Pagan precision at Garni gives way to Christian mystery, carved into living rock, illustrating Armenia's layered spiritual history. Yet the two sites share more than proximity. Both were shaped by the Azat's waters and the region's volcanic heart, a conversation between stone and faith. Walk the stones at Garni, and you can still feel the seam where nature's geometry met human devotion, where columns mimic basalt columns and rituals echoed the river's pulse. Visitors often leave with a single lingering question: how did a Hellenistic temple come to stand where lava and legend converge? And what else does this fold in the earth conceal? To answer that, we follow the trail from Garni's terrace down into the gorge, listening for the stones to tell stories older than kingdoms. What you will discover next is not just ruins and rocks, but a living archive of Armenia's volcanic past and the people who turned it into temple and monastery. Stay with me as we step between column and basalt, between sunlit altar and shadowed cave, uncovering the hidden mechanics that made Garni both a sanctuary and a geological wonder. Rising like a stone staircase through the heart of Yerevan, the cascade offers panoramic views that frame Mount Ararat, in a way found in few cityscapes. Do you know the cascade hides an underground maze of galleries and sculptural surprises that most visitors never expect? Built in tiers of travertine, its terraces host modern art, fountains, and intimate plazas that bleed into one another. From its steps, you can trace the city's Soviet past, its Ottoman crossroads, and an artist's present all at once. Climbing upward, each platform reveals a different perspective. Street life below, the river Hrazdan cutting a green ribbon, and the distant snow-capped peaks. Local musicians and impromptu exhibitions turn the stairs into a living gallery that changes with every season. Beneath the open flights, a succession of contemporary sculptures nestle inside cavernous halls, creating a dialogue between stone and spacey faces. The cafes and terraces near the top lead seamlessly toward the Modern Art Museum, inviting pause and conversation before the city opens into the next landmark. At sunset, the cascade becomes a gathering place. Families, students, and elders share the same benches while the city lights begin to glitter. That evening glow naturally guides you toward Republic Square, whose grand fountains and government buildings continue the story of Yerevan's layers. Walk from the cascade down through the adjacent streets, and you enter the Vernissage Market, where crafts and history converge in stalls offering carved kachkars and hand-woven rugs. The tactile memory of those objects echoes the sculptures you just passed, linking public art with private tradition in a continuous urban thread. Whether you're here for architecture, art, or the simple pleasure of a long staircase, the cascade is where Yerevan reveals itself slowly, insistently, and with surprising intimacy. And as you descend, the route itself nudges you toward the next discovery, a museum, a cafe, or a street that whispers another chapter of Armenia's story. Guided tours and safety wanderers alike find that the cascade rewards slow attention, with stories carved in stone and unexpected rooftop views that feel cinematic. From there, it is easy to drift toward the elegant Matenadaran repository of manuscripts, where pages as old as kingdoms continue the conversation between past and present. Framed beneath the glassy shadow of Mount Ararat, Khor Virap Monastery perches where volcanic soil meets the Aras plain. Do you know the monastery sits directly over a deep pit, where Saint Gregory the Illuminator was chained for 13 years before converting a king? From this low, sacred ground, the silhouette of Ararat seems unnaturally close, a constant presence in prayers and paintings. Pilgrims believe the very earth here holds traces of early Christian rituals that transformed an entire nation in the 4th century. The complex itself is deceptively simple: stone chapels, a bell tower, and a courtyard that seems to fold history into its walls. Yet beneath the monastery lies that infamous pit, now sealed and honored, a physical reminder of faith endured in darkness. Walking the narrow steps, you can almost hear the echo of chains and the whispered psalms that once filled these chambers. Archaeologists have uncovered layers of sacred objects and inscriptions that map a timeline from pagan rites to Christian devotion. Khor Virap's location also marks a crossroads between cultures. Armenian, Persian, and Ottoman influences brushed this land for centuries. The view from the hill connects Khor Virap to the spread of monasteries across the Ararat plain, leading visitors toward the medieval monasteries of Noravank and Geghard. In spring, carpets of wildflowers soften the fortress-like stones and frame Mount Ararat in a way painters have chased for generations. Local guides will point out a scattering of basalt columns and ancient irrigation channels that hint at the region's volcanic past and human ingenuity. Listen closely, and you'll hear stories passed down by villagers, tales of miracles, royal conversions, and secret tunnels to nearby settlements. Those oral histories tie Khor Virap to Yerevan's churches, showing how a single imprisoned saint reshaped rituals across the Republic. Standing at the monastery's courtyard at dawn, sunlight slices through the cold air, illuminating frescoes and the cracked faces of icons. Dilijan National Park harbors one of the rarest mixed forests in the Caucasus, sheltering relic trees and endemic understory species. Do you know that the park's network of karst springs and glacial lakes like Pars create microclimates that sustain plants absent elsewhere in the region? Moss-carpeted trails wind between ancient yews, hornbeams, and oriental beech, where the air carries the scent of wild thyme and ledum. Birdsong here is a living atlas. Raptors, woodpeckers, and the elusive Caucasian grouse map seasonal migrations through hidden valleys. Hikers follow rivers that ripple past limestone cliffs, stumbling upon limestone caves and thermal springs whispered about in local folklore. Local herbalists still gather medicinal plants from untouched glades, a living link to traditions woven through centuries of Armenian healing practice. Lake Pars, a mirror-like pool tucked in the forest, reflects pines and cliffs, and offers sudden, serene panoramas that seem almost invented. Fishermen and picnickers shares its shores with otters and dragonflies, while trails from the lake lead toward Geghard Monastery, perched on a rocky spur. Geghard's stone domes and frescoed chapels frame the park's narrative, reminding visitors that natural and spiritual histories grew side by side. Craftspeople in nearby Dilijan town transform walnut and beech into carved spoons and ornate cabinetry, continuing artistic dialogues shaped by the forest. In autumn, the mountains ignite in copper and gold, and every valley feels like a secret painted for those willing to walk deeper. Conservation projects here blend sustainable tourism with community stewardship, inviting travelers to help protect endangered orchids and the rare Eurasian lynx. Trails threaded with wooden bridges segue into village lanes where tea houses serve wild herb and fusions and stories of ancient caravans. From these lanes, winding roads open toward Lake Sevan, promising a dramatic shift from emerald forest to island sapphire. Perched on a dramatic basalt outcrop above the Vorotan Gorge, Tatev Monastery seems to defy gravity with centuries of stone. Its 9th century architecture and cloister complex served as a major medieval university, shaping Armenian scholarship across the Caucasus. Do you know Tatev's library once held tens of thousands of manuscripts, many copied and illuminated within these walls, making it one of the region's great centers of learning? Surviving invasions, earthquakes, and centuries of isolation, the monastery became a refuge of culture and resistance for Armenians. Approaching Tatev by the wings of Tatev cable car offers a dizzying reveal, dropping you over jagged cliffs where vultures ride thermals and rivers carve into the earth below. The monastery's stone facades, khachkars and fresco fragments hold inscriptions in Armenian and traces of Byzantine, Persian, and Mongol encounters. Inside the main church, sunlight slants through narrow windows, illuminating crosses and frescoes that silently tell centuries of prayers and petitions. The sound of footsteps echoes across thick flagstones that once carried scholars, monks, and pilgrims on their daily routines. Beyond the religious functions, Tatev operated as an economic nucleus, controlling trade routes and hosting armories and artisan workshops. Local legends speak of hidden tunnels etched into the rock and bells that rang to warn villages of danger. Today, restorations have stabilized roofs and conserved manuscripts, but the monastery still breathes with living traditions, baptisms, pilgrimages, and the slow rhythm of rural life. From Tatev, the landscape flows toward Irani's wine caves and the highlands beyond, linking spiritual heritage with viticulture and ancient trade. Walking the monastery courtyards, you sense layers of history. Ottoman taxes, Persian siyas, and the quiet persistence of monastic routine. Each carved cross stone and chapel niche is a chapter in Armenia's survival story, connecting Tatev to the neighboring monasteries scattered across the gorge. For photographers and historians alike, Tatev offers composition and context, the raw geology framing human ingenuity in stone. And if you pause at the cliff edge, you can almost hear the whisper of the Vorotan River below, a reminder that even the mightiest sanctuaries are part of a larger, living landscape. Scholars from Europe and the Middle East once corresponded with Tatev's teachers, exchanging ideas that traveled far beyond these cliffs. This intellectual legacy reappears today in cultural festivals and conservation projects that aim to keep the monastery's stories alive. Visitors who trace the worn steps quickly realize that Tatev is not an isolated relic, but a living node in a chain of Armenian memory. Leaving Tatev, the route naturally leads you towards the nearby village trails and the vast highland panoramas that continue Armenia's narrative in stone and soil. The red volcanic cliffs of the Amagu Gorge near Noravank are one of Armenia's most extraordinary and rare geological spectacles, carved and compacted over millions of years into dramatic honeycombed towers. Do you know Noravank Monastery perches within that exact canyon? Its stonework so intimately matched to the red tuff that the buildings look as if they grew from the rock itself. Step closer, and you find a medieval carpentry of stone, where the 13th and 14th century architects married daring vertical geometry with delicate ornamentation, a combination almost unparalleled in Armenia. The famed sculptor Momik carved some of the monastery's most astonishing kachkars and reliefs, including intricate grapevine and hunting scenes that hint at deep local traditions. Inside the two-story Sur Bastvatsation, a suspended staircase and unexpectedly airy upper chamber defy the compact footprint of the complex, producing a sense of vertical lightness. Noravank was the spiritual and cultural heart of the Orbelian Principality, a place where clergy, artists, and traders converged to shape manuscripts, liturgy, and stone. Look closely at the bas-reliefs, and you may spot mythic beasts and stylized faces that scholars still debate, echoes of pre-Christian motifs braided into Christian stone. Beyond the monastery, the canyon shelves down toward the Armenia region, linking Noravank's sacred craft to the world's earliest known winemaking, discovered in nearby caves. That unexpected handshake between divine stonework and ancient viticulture tells a larger story. This valley was a crossroads of ritual, agriculture and artistry for millennia. Visiting Noravank is to read a living palimpsest, where each carved cornice and weathered portal keeps a secret of the people who chiseled and prayed here. And when you leave the courtyard toward the sunlit cliffs, the path itself guides you naturally to the vineyards and caves below, as if the landscape insists you follow its story onward. Beneath the dome of Mount Ararat, Gyumri's Kumayri district preserves streets paved with volcanic tuff and facades sculpted in fiery red stone. Do you know that the red tuff used across Kumayri was formed from explosive eruptions of Mount Ararat and gives the town its unique warm glow? Wander its narrow lanes and you'll find carved balconies, ornate doorways and courtyards that whisper of merchants, poets, and exiles who once shaped this regional capital. The 19th century houses survived centuries of change, and despite the scars of the 1988 earthquake, still speak in a language of resilience and chistointi. Kumayri is less a frozen museum and more a living workshop where blacksmiths, cobblers, and textile artists keep old techniques alive amid modern cavesti. Its markets sell delicacies and handicrafts whose designs trace back to the Shirak Plain and the village looms that fed Armenian households for generations. Stand before the Jitoxian Museum, and you'll feel the layered history of family portraits, embroidered christening shirts, and brittle letters that map personal journeys across empires. Cross a small square, and an austere church bell will remind you how faith and folklore braided community life here, linking holy sites to the rhythms of daily trade. Artists in Gyumri turn reclaimed stone and salvaged wood into modern sculptures so that every refurbished facade becomes both memory and statement. Festivals spill from cobbled courtyards into the streets, where folk songs and improvised theater keep local stories visible and fiercely contemporary. Walk from Kumayri toward the city's outer limits, and the landscape opens to orchards and the broad sweep of the Shirak Plain, reminding you this town grew because of its land as much as its craft. From these same lanes, a road unfurls eastward, guiding the traveler toward the volcanic ridges and monasteries that will be the next chapter of Armenia's layered tapestry. Carved into the basalt walls of a narrow Azat River gorge, Geghard Monastery is partly hewn from the mountain itself. Its principal church and a cluster of chapels tumble out of the rock, like a secret cathedral grown from stone. Founded before the 4th century and richly expanded in the 13th century, Geghard preserves layers of Armenian faith written in stone. It was once a major repository for relics, most famously the lance that was said to pierce Christ, a relic that made this remote complex a magnet for pilgrims across medieval Eurasia. Step inside, and you feel the cool, dim chambers where sunlight filters through narrow openings and falls on carved crosses and worn prayer ledges. The acoustics here bend and fold voices, so that even the faintest chant seems to rise and swirl out of the rock like incense. Every wall is a manuscript of carvings, delicate kachkars, inscriptions in Old Armenian, and animal motifs that bridge pagan artistry and Christian devotion. Fresco fragments cling to the vaults, their pigments muted but stubbornly, intimately human, after centuries in shadow. Below the churches, cave tombs and chapels cut into the cliff offer intimate spaces where light and water meet stone, and a cool spring still whispers its way through the monastery's foundations. Pilgrims who arrived centuries ago sought both the relics above and the purification of the spring below, creating a living ritual that persists in quiet forms today. Geghard's setting also connects it to its neighbor, the classical temple of Garni, which crowns the opposite ridge and recalls the region's pre-Christian past. Walk the ridge between them, and the contrast is striking. Garni's sunlit columns and Hellenistic lines point outward, while Geghard folds inward, a place where faith is carved into earth and stone. To visit Geghard is to enter a terrain where architecture becomes geology and devotion becomes landscape. And when you leave its shadow, you carry with you the echo of chants and the memory of stone warmed by centuries of hands. Jermuk Waterfall pours over black volcanic tuff into a misty gorge, fed by some of the region's richest mineral springs, a rarity among the world's waterfalls. Do you know that Jermuk Waterfall is nourished by naturally carbonated springs, whose mineral signature helped shape an entire spa culture in the surrounding highlands? From the observation terraces, the cascade throws off a fine, saline mist that locals swear heals skin and lifts fatigue. Walk the worn stone paths, and you pass old Soviet-era balneotherapy pavilions that speak to decades of visitors seeking the water's reputed powers. Beyond the immediate spectacle, those springs originate in deep fissures within ancient volcanic rock, linking the waterfall to the same geology that carved the plateau. That geology also threads a path to nearby canyon temples and mountain passes, making Jermuk a natural bridge between healing landscapes and historic sites. In winter, the falls knot into glittering threads of ice, and in spring, meltwater swells their roar into a drumbeat that echoes across the valley. Locals time festivals around that swell, and seasonal markets appear where shepherds trade highland cheese and herbal tonics, distilled from the same mineral-rich ground. Engineers once bottled the waters for export, but the true treasure remains the place itself, where steam rises from crevices and pine aromas mingle with metallic tang. You can follow a narrow track upstream to find smaller cascades and hot springs hidden under overhangs, each with a different temperature and taste. From Jermuk's lookout points, your eye can trace ridgelines to ancient monasteries perched on distant cliffs, reminders that Armenia's spiritual roots run through the same terrain. Hiking from the waterfall toward those monasteries, travelers move from literal healing waters to the contemplative silence of stone sanctuaries. Even the language of local vendors echoes geology, with words for types of springs and spring-born salts passed down across generations. These names map a culture that measures the land by its waters and prepares remedies from what the earth itself yields. To stand at Jermuk's edge is to feel a conversation between fire and water, volcanic heat that forged the rocks and rain that sculpts the fall. And once you leave the gorge, that conversation continues along winding roads toward vineyards and ancient cellars, where local winemakers speak of mineral tones as if tasting the waterfall itself. In the rest of this film, we'll trace those roads, from spa town benches to monastery bells, to reveal how one waterfall shaped livelihoods and legends. Expect surprising rituals, forgotten recipes, and the stubborn pride of people who learn to live in rhythm with these very waters. By the time we circle back, you'll understand why Jermuk Waterfall is more than a spectacle. It's a living source that threads geology, health, and history into a single stream. Prepare to encounter a place where science, folklore, and daily life blend in ways you never imagined. Lake Sevan sits at nearly 1,100 meters above sea level and is one of the world's largest high-altitude freshwater lakes, a rarity on Earth. Do you know Lake Sevan once held an island crowned by the medieval Sevanavank Monastery until Soviet-era water diversion turned that island into a peninsula, changing the landscape forever? The lake's turquoise surface stretches for more than 100 kilometers of shoreline, harboring Sevan trout, locally called ishkan, a species that shaped regional diets and rituals. Decades of industrial fishing, irrigation, and mismanaged water projects nearly wiped out the ishkan and pushed Sevan's ecosystem to the brink, sparking fierce conservation battles. Sevanavank's twin churches, cradled on the peninsula's cliffs, became symbols of cultural resilience, drawing pilgrims and painters who come for sunlight, striking the stone. Around the bay, towns like Sevan and Sevanavank hum with seaside life in summer, bazaars selling smoked fish, and families gathered for harvest festivals by the water. Hidden beneath Sevan's surface is an infrastructure story. Water routed into the Hrazdan River powers turbines and irrigates fields, making the lake a lifeline beyond its shores. In recent decades, irrigation controls, restocking programs, and a national park designation have nudged Sevan toward recovery. Those scars remain visible along exposed terraces. Framed by volcanic ridges and the Ararat's range, Sevan shifts moods from sunlit sapphire to a glassy winter plain where locals cross ice to traditional winter houses. A drive from Sevan leads naturally into the forested valleys of Dilijan and the medieval monasteries of Lori, weaving natural grandeur with Armenia's deep historical tapestry. To understand Armenia's heart, you must stand on Sevan's shore and listen to the wind that has carried feastiermen's songs, monks' prayers, and political debates for generations. What will the next chapter reveal about how nature and human will entwine to save, exploit, and restore this lake that still defines an entire nation? From the low fields of the Ararat Plain, Mount Ararat's twin summits, Greater Ararat at 5,137 meters and Little Ararat at 3,896 meters, loom like a frozen volcanic cathedral, visible across borders. Do you know Mount Ararat sits outside modern Armenian borders, yet remains the country's most potent natural symbol, its glaciers preserving stories older than any map? Standing at the Khor Virap viewpoint, you feel the plain flattening toward that massive silhouette, an optical intimacy that has inspired poets and pilgrims for millennia. The monastery's red soil and ancient stones that on clear mornings it seems possible to reach out and touch snowfields that belong to another country. Seasonal light paints Ararat in impossible hues, from molten gold in autumn sunrises to bruised violet under winter storms, each palette hinting at geological violence beneath its calm. Glacial tongues and volcanic ridgelines whisper of eruptions, ice retreats, and climate shifts that scientists can read like rings in a living archive. Local elders will tell you the mountain's name in Utch tones and point to ridgelines where ice preserves ancient pollen, archaeological clues, and even traces of ash from long-ago eruptions. Photographers learn to wait for the ephemeral window when low clouds lift, revealing the full symmetry of Ararat and returning reflections in the Aras River below. From this viewpoint, you can trace the historical line that connects Ararat to Echmiadzin's cathedrals and to monasteries tacked to cliff faces across Armenia's plateaus. Each vista becomes a chapter. The mountain anchors national memory, while neighboring sites like Noravank and Tatev echo its spires in rock and prayer. As hikers descend from the viewpoint into villages, they pass orchards that literally drink the volcanic soils, producing fruit varieties you won't find elsewhere. Those cherries and apricots carry flavor, shaped by wind-borne minerals from Ararat slopes, a culinary proof of the mountain's quiet influence. At dusk, when lights in Yerevan wink on and Ararat darkens to silhouette, the mountain acts as a compass of identity, a visible ledger of geology and folklore intertwined. To stand at the Mount Ararat viewpoint is to read a layered story, natural, cultural, and climatic, where every ridge connects you to another place in Armenia's long landscape. By the time you leave, the memory of that cross-border peak will have threaded the monasteries, orchards, and rivers into a single route through time and terrain. From the basalt pillars of Garni to the sapphire sweep of Lake Sevan, Armenia stitches rugged geology and rare highland waters into a landscape found in very few places on Earth. We stood where the Sevan trout still fights for survival above 1,900 meters, and where ancient vines in Armenia produced some of the earliest wine ever tasted by humans. The canyon-locked monasteries, Geghard carved from living rock, and Noravank clinging to crimson cliffs, taught us how faith and stone can become one. Then the wings of Tatev carried us over ravines on the world's longest reversible aerial tramway, connecting medieval miracle to modern engineering. In the shadow of Mount Ararat at Khor Virap, we felt history's weight, a single silhouette tying myths, exiles, and devotion to a horizon that belongs to more than one nation. Jermuk's mineral springs and waterfalls promised cures and refreshment in a land that has always prized its natural pharmacy. Every route we followed folded into another, the road from Garni to Geghard, sliding into the gorge that leads to Noravank, and then on toward Tatev and Armenia. This network of stone roads, riverbeds, and footbridges reveals a country where geography shaped culture and culture, in turn, reshaped the land. If today's world rushes toward the newest and fastest, Armenia asks us to slow down and read the palimpsest of millennia written on its valleys and monasteries. Carry the stories of the oldest wineries, the high lake that cradles an endemic trout, and the soaring monasteries with you. They are invitations to return, to explore another cliff, another cave, another glass.